I was blown away several times by the conversation with our next guest. Today on the PeopleNova Podcast, we discuss the intentionality of building a community for success. How do you surround yourself with supportive individuals? Where do you get your energy? What drains your energy? How do you improve interactions? How do you hold boundaries? Brené Brown and I chat about how we teach people how to treat us. So stay tuned. And hello, everyone. Welcome back to the PeopleNova Podcast. My name is Rachel O'Neill, and I am here with a new friend. I'm very excited to introduce you all to Brené Brown. B, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, Rachel.
Awesome. Can you introduce yourself for our audience and let them know how amazing you are?
Well, thank you. Well, my name is Brené Brown. As she said, I define myself as a communications professional who specializes in relationship building. I currently do that through a platform, a podcast as well, called Nightcap with Brené Brown. We have candid conversations over cocktails, and the audience is entrepreneurs, social change agents, and creatives. I've been in marketing and branding for approximately 10 years, focusing more so on in-person experiences and brand management.
That is fantastic. And yes, listeners, audience, if you haven't checked out her podcast, it's on YouTube, it's on all the platforms. Go check it out. It is hilarious and fantastic. Nightcap with Brené Brown. Awesome. So we both have this affinity for candid conversations and kind of opening up and really exploring the human side. I chat about the human side of business and how it's not really business to business anymore, I think, or ever. I think sometimes we kind of forgot that, but it really is human to human, right? Like we do business with other humans.
Exactly.
What does that mean to you? What has your experience been?
With me, I think coming from marketing as well, when I'm working with other companies, I try to remember that there's another person on the other side of the table. So before we jump directly into whatever that objective is, to actually just take some time to speak and meet with that individual on a kind of more human level. Mm-hmm. Ask them about how their day's been. Ask them questions that doesn't necessarily pertain to the job. Find some kind of common ground so that we can kind of build a relationship that will better help us with the business objective. So to me, it's more so meeting that person where they are and building that personal relationship first.
Mm-hmm. And are you mindful of like the end consumer as opposed to like your clients that you work with? How are we separating those audiences?
Once we get into it and we figure out, what our objective is, who we're trying to meet, we also have to build like brand personas and things of that nature and try to get into their space of what they need, what are we trying to do for them? What problem are we trying to solve? So we do have to think on the end result too.
Yeah, I in my work, I do the people strategy side. So you do personas for branding. I do the people, the internal branding, as they sometimes say, right? And so while my clients may be the CEO, the founder, right, my persona, right, that I'm targeting is the workforce and like the future people who are either future or current, people who are working for that founder, for that CEO, to really help make sure that we're having people strategies that rapidly scale and grow with the business. Yeah. What has there been a particular poignant learning moment over your career that has really helped motivate you in the direction that your career has taken you?
I think a moment that's motivated me would have to be during my time in Los Angeles working within entertainment and working with bigger personalities, or at least on stage they have a bigger personality.
Oh, tell me more.
They're really shy, they're really quiet. And so it's almost balancing two different people in one person, right? And they need different things. I think for me, that's where I really said, okay, I can't be a fan and then try to service this individual from the space of a fan. I have to get to know them as who they are in their day-to-day when they're not on stage, because it really is two different people.
It is. So how do you share some tips and tricks? How do you get behind kind of the persona, right? And like CEOs and founders, they have personas, right? They have to go in front of board meetings. They have to give TED Talks, right? They have to be on podcasts. So they have a persona. And sometimes I feel like you have to really work at getting behind that. So what tips and tricks do you have?
First and foremost, the simplest tip, listening. You have to listen. Be an active listener. That's the best tool that I've used, because you'll hear it. They'll talk about it, and you just have to catch it. Whether it's them talking about going to the games with their children or their parents or something, like they'll give you there's an end in the conversation, but you have to actively listen for it.
I love it. I absolutely love it. How do you help people keep opening up and like keep sharing, as opposed to being like, yeah, somebody, my dad's a lawyer, so I went to law school, and so here I am, like, blah. It's like, oh, there's more
to that. Then it's like, well, what prompted you to go to law school? Was there something that happened in your life where you just wanted to advocate for someone who didn't have a voice, or was there someone was it close to home to you? Or I'll share an experience with myself. If I have some kind of connection to the law, I'll share my story. So then that they will then begin to share more. So I'm either going to ask you more questions, or I'm going to share something personal with myself.
So we hear a lot in the leadership space about vulnerability, right? And so you just touched on sharing something personal about myself, and that theory. I love Brené Brown's work, right? Being vulnerable and really sharing and opening up. Have you found that that's helpful? So this is where I'm struggling, right? Because I agree with you, obviously, right? 100% agree with that opening up and that sharing and being vulnerable with other people, like that helps get us past, the superficial bullshit of like who we are as humans and like what are the common struggles and how can we support each other. But there's oftentimes a metaphor that I use is sometimes that I'm working with a founder, working with a CEO, and I say, oh, this person is a rock. They're closed and they're like protective, as opposed to working with seeds. Like I love nurturing seeds. I love nurturing founders and CEOs who are like, give me more like nourishment and sunshine and water and affection and love. And like with rocks, no matter how much nurturing and I pour onto them, they're still a rock. And it's like, I don't got time for glacial years to pass for you to crack open.
Right. So how do you get to them? Okay. Well, we can't help everyone. Let's just start there, right? Like,
I want to.
I would say for someone who is really closed off, they're typically closed off for a reason. And you just have to find out what motivates them. And it may not be the personal connection, because they may not be comfortable, like you said, being vulnerable, but it could be something else. And the more time that you spend with them, the more you begin to peel back that layer, the shell begins to crack, right? But in that space, you can't push. You may just have to simply be there so that they can feel like, okay, this person shows up, this person's here, this person makes sure that I'm continually progressing. They're making sure that I'm hitting my metrics. Maybe I can trust them a little bit more and let them make that first move. Because usually what happens is it's like, hey, what are you doing? What, do you want to get a drink or whatever? And then there's your end. So sometimes you have to, less is more. You have to allow them to make that first step.
I love that you mentioned trust. I was hoping you would go there and you did. So let's go there.
Okay.
Trust. Right? Like it's a big topic for people. And I agree with you. Oh my God. It's like, where have you been all my life? Like there's this like protective layer of like, oh, I don't trust anyone. And then you do kind of find that niche, right? The little, oh, you're a seed deep down in there, right? Love that.
Yeah.
But like it does.
Everyone is. Yeah.
Everyone is. right? Whether we present as a rock or we really deep down are a seed, right? But it's around trust. So how do you approach trust, and like, how do you dialogue with either your clients or people, you know, to help illuminate kind of trust and build it?
I think it depends on how we're looking at it. So when it's a client and we're talking about marketing, we're talking about branding, results. So showing them the results that I've gotten for others and things of that nature kind of builds that trust in my work. When it comes to those personal relationships and building trust, it's showing up. It's being there when called, sometimes even beyond the regular working hours, right? And showing them that you're really invested in them. Like it has to do with showing up. It has to do with your character, your moral compass, and really being present in someone's life.
Yeah, it's tough. When I want to ask about you, because I know where I stand on the spectrum. When you meet someone new, do you immediately trust people, or does it take time for you to trust another person?
Everyone gets a certain level of trust. Like everyone's coming on, they say with class, everyone comes in with an A, and it depends on what you do, determines if you're going to keep that A for the semester. Well, you come in with a certain level of trust. Now, it depends. Are you going to gain more of my trust as our relationship develops, or is my trust going to decrease based off of your behavior? But everyone starts with a certain level of trust with me.
I adore you. You just blew my mind.
It's the only, I mean, it's just how I've navigated through my life, because I don't want to come in and have preconceived notions of somebody, or I just want to give you the opportunity to show me who you are. And in order for me to do that, there has to be some level of trust there. I trust that you may disappoint me. I trust that you may not disappoint me, but the option is yours. The option is yours.
I mean, it's kind of like a buffet. It's out there, right?
Yeah. Do what you will.
So I appreciate you so much, right? And here's how I unpack that. I'm a recovering perfectionist, tell everyone. And I stumbled on the work of Carol Dweck and her growth mindset, right? Okay. And I realized that I held a very binary, like either I was successful or I was not, either I achieved or I did not, right? And I realized in myself that I held a very binary, like, approach, and it was not serving me. And thank God Carol came into my life, or the book. I don't know her personally yet. So I read her book and I was like, oh my gosh, like I had that moment of like, oh, there's another way of thinking. Mm-hmm. Oh, if I recognize that there's a growth mindset and I can approach different situations as, hey, let's learn from this. And if that is resonating with me, like, okay, it did, and it does to this day, like I can move towards exploring new situations as, well, let's see what we learn from this. I've never done it before, but I mean, I just said that to my colleague earlier today. He's like, well, let's do this. And I'm like, let's learn. I'm like, I'm not quite sure. I have feelings, but like, right? Like I deliberately said those words out loud, mostly to reinforce to myself. Like that's what we do.
Yeah.
So like, let's approach this new situation. We're all figuring shit out in the world of Corona. So like, yeah, let's try this. Mm-hmm. And one of the concepts, to circle back to your comment and to circle back to trust, one of the comments that I really had a hard time like moving off of was the binary concept of trust, because I've always seen it as binary. And you blew my mind when you're like, no, there's a third option. I was like, oh my God, wait a minute, there's a third option?
Yes, we got options here. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I think there's, I mean, I love the growth mindset, right? And I'll talk to everybody, ad nauseum who wants to talk about it and catch about it. But there's a third option, right? So like getting back to trust and like, it's important. And I coach people a lot about understanding where you are on that trust spectrum, because in real time, before this conversation, I literally was like, nope, you earn trust with me. Like, that's just how I am, right? Because I still have that like little protective recovering perfectionist, right?
But I can relate to, I call it the dying to the spirit of perfection, right? It's the biggest sabotager. Perfectionism is the biggest sabotage in life, from my experience. And
absolutely.
It was in therapy that I was able to see that I had suffered from that same thing. It was black, it was white, there was no gray area. And then it was like, well, how do you live like that, right? If you don't allow yourself that space to just sit in the gray area. It does wonders for your brain. It is really hard because it doesn't have an exact answer. It just is. It just is.
It just is.
It just is.
It just is. Yeah. I had to do, not only did I discover Carol Dweck and her work on mindset, but I myself participated in, I think it was like 5 years or so of cognitive behavioral therapy myself to like help understand my brain patterns and my neural pathways. And I feel, I mean, there's so many discoveries, you know, along my journey, but I feel like retraining those neural pathways to understand gray is a part of life. Let's learn while we're in the gray and be like, oh, well, that was an experiment. Okay.
And it didn't work. And so what?
And so what?
I'm still here.
I'm still here. People still love me. I'm not an evil person, right? Like, yeah, we're all, another phrase I love to say is we all deserve sunshine. We all deserve nourishment and love and affection and sunshine. Some people, some flowers want full sun and some want partial shade. Great. Awesome. Figure out what your umbrella looks like and go for it.
And go for it. Exactly. I agree wholeheartedly.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's fantastic. So, so what other exciting things are you working on? You have your podcast, you have your marketing and consulting business. Like, how can our listeners help you? What's next up for you?
I think at the moment where we are with this whole virus, I've just been focused on expanding my platforms and creating spaces for people to be able to connect. And so I'm really pushing that through this time, pushing out content that's of value. At least I hope it's of value to someone other than myself. And
I think it's of value. I think it's great.
and just giving people a place to connect. That's really what I've been focusing on throughout this whole COVID-19. Amplifying this platform, creating it for others to be able to come and share their experiences.
Yeah. Creating spaces, holding spaces. What does it mean to like hold space with someone?
Hold space with someone, to me, again, it's always about, I'm always big on meeting people where they are, right? Not having the expectation that they're going to be this idea of what I created by whatever I read up from them or whatever the case may be, but giving them the opportunity to just be in communication with them and allow them to share whatever it is that they want to share, and me doing the same and building something of value. That's what taking space or being in space with someone means to me. Mm-hmm. Being present in the moment with someone else and allowing them to share and me sharing as well, and seeing where that takes us, if anywhere.
Yeah, that's great. We hear in a lot of parlance these days, people are like, "Oh, let's hold space," and I want that to be genuine, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes when we hear phrases too much, it becomes buzzwordy, and I'm like, "Oh no, but this is genuine." Like holding space,
and it can be authentic. It can be very precious, right? That's how I look at. I think that's how I look at relationships with people. They're very precious because people are opening up to you. You're opening up to them. You're able to build on an authentic level. There's no preconceived notions. And I treasure that. It could be my sign because I'm a Cancer. We're nurturers. We were so motherly. It could be that. But at the end of the day, I really do care for people. Like, I care for people. So it only shows itself in whatever I do. That's going to be the base of it, is building relationships and connecting with people, whatever I do. That's the underlying.
So what if we have a listener out there who's like, I don't care about people? Well, I guess they wouldn't be listening to the podcast, would they? I can't help it.
sometimes your haters do listen, and it's like, you really need to. You don't allow yourself to let yourself know you need this. It's okay. It's okay.
It is okay. It is okay. It is okay to have those moments of reflection of like, oh, and that maybe that was too strong, right? Instead of I don't like people, it's like I don't like that situation with that person, right? Or like maybe I could have played that out differently, or maybe I didn't get what I wanted, like the song says, but I got what I needed.
Okay.
And going back to that, being vulnerable with other people, I recalled a memory of a new colleague, right? I had gone in-house with a client and I was developing their people strategy, and there were some relationships, again, I was my trusting self, not trusting. And I'm like, okay, like, here's how I'm going to approach this. And there was one particular gentleman, like when we sat down for our first one-on-one, like, the floodgates opened, and I was like, not crying, not emotional bag of drama crying, but like, oh my God, you went through that. And how are you doing now? And I'm going through this. And like, we like talked about our mental wellness, and we talked about food and our strategies around food. Cause I have a food allergy, and like, his health conditions were being controlled by food. And it's just like, we instantly in our first conversation had this bond. I was like, oh yeah, I'll do anything for you. It just amazed me that why can I have that kind of relationship with one person, but then be so like protective with another person?
Okay, well, I do believe that we have our intuition. I do believe like you should listen to your intuition. If you meet someone and you don't feel like you should open up right away, like pay attention to that, right? Because there might be something there, a blockage, whatever the case may be, that you don't need to be overly sharing with that particular individual. But that doesn't mean that they don't necessarily deserve a listening ear or empathy, right? So still take the same steps, but just be a little bit cautious to feel that out. You just wouldn't jump right in the same way you would the individual, because there was a connection there. You felt that with them. They were on the same wavelength as you, and you were able to then share. So you still have to kind of like police things, and not just everyone you meet, hey, I'm such and such and X, Y, and Z, because you don't know what that other person could be dealing with. But I would say take caution in that space. And that's why, because people are just at certain different levels. And you meet people, I go right back to what I always say, you meet people where they are.
Yeah.
Don't become an oversharer, because that can turn someone off too, if they're not there yet.
Well, and that's it. How do you figure out where they're at? Right? Like if you walk in and you're like, hey, I'm Rachel and here's my bag of drama, right? Like the other person is not
You
ready.
can kind of tell by their disposition, right? So I'm a very observant person. Even though I love to talk, I'm also a very observant person. So I watch people. I watch their demeanor. I watch how they interact. I see if they're a little reserved. Like you have to have all that information before going into communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I see someone and they're sitting and they're kind of to themselves or whatever, I'm like, okay, well, this person is either shy, doesn't do well in large groups. Let me try and communicate to them one-on-one. If I talk to them one-on-one and they seem as if they're pushing back and don't want to communicate, I just, thank them for their time, nice meeting you, and casually move on. But I still watch that person throughout if I'm in the meeting or what have you, because you're going to get social cues. They're going to drop social cues. So you just have to be very observant. It takes a lot of energy. It does. But I think, again, coming from a marketing standpoint, we're taught to pay attention to all those things. So when you think no one's paying attention, someone really is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are you an introvert?
I am an introvert. I'm only an extrovert until I have to be. But on a day-to-day, I can be in a small little space with whatever computer, phone, microphone, because I love music, journal, writing, and just be to myself. And when I go out, because I do give a lot to people, I look at that as my time to recharge. Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. So when I was listening to you chat and you're like, oh, it drains my energy. And I'm like, she's an introvert. I love this. I am too. Like,
yeah. And it's so funny because when we talk about the two sides, people, when I talked about the artists being on stage and there's two sides to them, because we can relate. There's two sides to us. Mm-hmm. People that see us doing these podcasts and stuff, oh, they're bubbly, they're this. And then after, they're like, oh, you're so quiet and reserved. And it's like, yeah, it just depends on what I'm doing.
Yeah. It's contextually appropriate, right? Like, yes. This is not, your baseline. And I love to also uncouple the concept that, or the myth that introverts are shy. And I'm like, nope, those are two different like assessment profiles, like totally different.
Yeah.
It's where you get your energy from.
And I just do not get my energy from large crowds. That's just that. Not at all. I love them. I love that I'll speak in front of them. I will communicate, one-on-one with individuals in a crowd, but I give more in large spaces than I receive.
Yeah, exactly. Same. Oh my God, I adore you for so many reasons. This is like when I'm on a panel or when I'm speaking like in front of a crowd, I love it. I deliver workshops all the time. Love it, right? Because I see all the synapses firing and people are learning and they're like taking away. I'm like, oh my God, this is great. And then I go put myself in a closet for the rest of the day.
It's like, yes, like I need to recharge. I need to like restore all that energy I've just poured out so I can go do it again. Yeah. Like it's so weird, right? When you think about it, so weird because I have friends who are the opposite. When they're by themselves, they're bored out of their mind, and they're just like, I need to get out. I need to be around people. I need to network. I need to engage. And I'm over here like, I just need a bottle of wine.
That's it.
I'm all set.
My friends are on house party, and they're like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "Nope."
I just learned about house party. I was like, another app. Oh my! They're like, people can jump in and jump out. I was like, oh no. I don't even look presentable half the time. You're not just jumping in and jumping out. Like, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. Like,
That's it. I'm like, I have my inner circle, right? Like as introverts do, right? Like I have my few people that like, they text, I'm obviously involved in responding, or like, God forbid one of my friend actually does the phone call. And I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong? Are you there? Oh, okay, cool. Okay. Like, who calls?
Yeah, like right now, like who? Leave a message. If you leave a message, I think something major has happened. Like,
shit gets real when you leave a message.
Yeah. I'm like, you left a voicemail. Oh my God, the world is coming to an end. It's happening. It's happening. That is so true.
So true. But so like as we share, it's also, I think the message, the takeaway for folks listening is self-awareness, right? Like understand how you orient, right? Where do you get your energy from? What drains your energy, right? And how do you create, autonomy? You're in charge of creating, today, your future, whatever happens tomorrow, but like do that with intention. And so one of the other things that I heard you touch on, if I rephrase it, is mindfulness. Be intentional about either how to structure your day, when to let people into your house party, when to not let people into your house party, right? But be intentional about it. Know that you do need those extroverted moments. If you are an extrovert, we need all flowers in the umbrella, all flowers in the flower bed. So not trying to binary one versus the other, but know what you need, I think, is the takeaway.
Yes. And that boils back to self-awareness and knowing self. I think I spent the last year really, really, really examining that for myself and how it plays a role in my work. And it's been phenomenal. Like, more aware I can be of my own quirks helps me better understand other people. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I love this. Do you have any tips on like how you work on your self-awareness?
I journal a lot, right?
Okay.
So I used to have this love. First, it started with affair food. I would just eat all my emotions. Like, that's just what I would do. And then it was like, okay, you get to a point where you're like, well, you have to evolve from that. You can't keep doing that. It's unhealthy. And so I started journaling, just writing down whatever, where I felt, whether I was mad, whether I was happy, whether I was excited, and then going back and reading those and just trying to figure out, well, what happened that caused this emotion? Why, like, how can I connect myself to those times?
Great.
Because sometimes we can live disconnected from self. You're just kind of going through the world. You're having these emotions. You don't really know why you're having these emotions because you're not paying attention to the current experiences. So really kind to be mindful and going back and reassessing again through my journaling. That's what worked for me. And being present in those moments. And what I like about journaling is if I wasn't present in the moment when it occurred, I'm able to bring myself back there after I read it within the journal. So I'm able to then say, well, what sparked that? Why was I feeling this way? Was I acting out of emotion, right? Did I make a sound decision? If I was acting out of emotion, why? What did it trigger in me to be able to produce this emotion? What is it that attached to in the past, right? So it's doing all those things and knowing that how we operate tends to stem from our life experiences. Subconsciously, we're not even connecting those dots. But when you take the time to sit back and really work through that, then you become more self-aware. You begin to identify what things are triggers for you. Then you're able to create spaces that are positive for you, and then build a community that sort of reflects that. Hopefully I answered your question.
Oh my gosh, you blew me away, right? Journaling, figuring out, debriefing, going back, like reliving it, writing it down, identifying, what the emotion was that you're feeling. Because, there's a lot of people that either feel emotions, or I have a friend who says he doesn't feel any emotion. I'm like, okay, that's curious. I don't know if I can help you there.
Yeah, that's a little dangerous,
like,
because something they cut it off. Yeah.
So recognizing there's all emotions in the rainbow, right? So which one are you feeling, and like how granular do you want to get? I learned a similar tool that like recall that situation, and there's like some guided questions that go along with it, right? Like, what was the situation? What did it trigger? What was the emotion? Where did I learn this pattern from? Right. And then the next step that I learned was re-envision that scenario differently.
Okay.
And if you acted one way, what is another way to kind of relive that situation and move that forward?
To change that behavior.
To change that emotional, like, wild card of like, does that just happened? Or like, how dare she? But I think it also gets back to the, like, I hear a lot of phrases of, oh, you can't change other people. You can only change your reaction to it. And before I did all my therapy work, I was like, that's just sugarcoating. Like, I don't know what y'all are, so hard, but it's so true.
It's so true. It's so true. It is so true. You cannot control another being. And then I also had to learn not to give someone else so much control over me. And we don't think we do that, but we do. We teach people how to treat us.
I say that all the time.
Yeah, we teach people how to treat us. Yeah.
We absolutely do. The second part that I heard in your answer a minute ago, I've still lost track of time, but I remember this, is you built an intentional community around you.
Yeah, some people had to go.
Oh, love it.
Yes. If they did not serve who I am today, then they had to go. Now, that doesn't make them bad people. That just means where I was at that time, I was able to relate to them. But now we no longer have a relationship because I'm no longer at that level. Now they can go do the work and grow, and we can reconnect, and that'd be perfectly fine. But yeah, some people had to go.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So true. And that happened for me too, right? I have to be very intentional. I'm still actively in it, right? But I am actively, like, being intentional and mindful about the people I let into my universe, and how can I nurture them? how are they nurturing me, right? Do they help me slide back into my crabby old patterns? Not helpful. That's not where I want to
key.
go.
That is key, because sometimes you can be in their presence and then realize your behavior begins to change. And then because you're self-aware, you recognize it in that moment. And you're like, oh, this is a side of myself that I don't like. And this is how we connected. I can't be around you because you still bring this up in me. Yeah.
Tough when it's family members.
It is. It really is. It really is.
I know we're supposed to be talking about work, but like
I can love you from afar. Yeah, but it all is the same. You can apply those same things to coworkers. You can apply those same things. Yeah.
It's tougher when it's coworkers, right? Like when you're around a coworker that brings up, the negative patterns that you self-identify with, right? And you're like, how do I distance from this coworker? I mean, you work together, so it's kind of tough, right? So how what do you do there?
You have to navigate the waters, right? So do not be, I'm gonna use the word fake or phony, right? Like, don't banter. Oh, haha. If you know you're not gonna build that relationship with this individual, you're not gonna go to drinks with them or out to eat with them. Just keep it platonic and keep it about work. You can still, if they mention something about their family, you can still be caring and things of that nature, but don't get so involved that they think that they're developing this friendship that doesn't exist. Just keep it very even kilter with them. That's what I do. Keep it very even kilter.
I think that's great. You can be professional. You can develop camaraderie, but just don't be fake. Don't try and because I feel like
that that you're not interested in. Yeah.
We smell the insincerity. I don't know. It's like an instinct. Like no matter how. Yeah. I definitely have interacted with a few people that I'm like, ooh, I don't want any of what's happening, right?
And be mindful for those that do it to you as well, because they want to get something from you. Some people will use the same tactics to obtain something from you. Yeah. As well. Yeah. That's not genuine. I've come across that too. And it's like, you don't really care about my well-being. You really just want this skill set that I have. And so you're going to do all these things for me to build trust in you. So remember I said you can lose trust. That's how you begin to lose trust. And once I identify that, it's like, okay, no, we're not going to work together. And being all right with no, that no is a big one. People have a hard time saying no.
Oh, it's so healthy. It is so healthy to say no.
It's so healthy. It's so healthy to say no, because they're so worried about the other person's feelings and their reactions. And again, you are not here to police somebody else's emotions, whether it's your boss, whether it's your colleague. That is not your job. So just be true and authentic to self and present your best self. And then however they deal with whatever comes out of your mouth is on them, honestly.
Yeah. As long as you're not intentionally saying mean things.
Yes, right? Absolutely. I mean, in terms of saying no and not wanting to.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So the qualifier is like, hold your boundaries and just be clear about it. Right. And if they get pissed off that you held your boundaries and said no, like that's on them.
That's on them. Yeah.
That's on them. Totally. A minute ago, we talked about empathy, and maybe we're still talking about empathy and emotions. One of the questions I love to ask all of my guests is, what's your favorite art? Medium or modality? If you have a favorite piece, while your gears are turning, I'll tell you why. I have a favorite quote from Darren Walker, and he said, "Without art, there's no empathy. And without empathy, there's no justice."
Wow. I like that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you can't move forward if you don't understand why you're moving forward. Yeah. I love that. I think in terms of art, I'm not big in art in terms of like paintings and things of that nature, but music wise, I know my favorite artist is Aretha Franklin. It's my all-time favorite. She just represented so much in terms of being a strong woman, but also being very proactive and an advocate, And she just embodied, to me, she embodied like the ideal of who I would want to be as an individual. And she didn't take any mess, and she didn't apologize for it. So for me, and music wise, I would say her. She's like my favorite artist.
Nice. Oh, I love it. What when you think of her, or when you listen to her music, what emotions stirs up for you?
It depends on the song, because Lord, she can take you everywhere. But for the most part, it's just empowered. Like her voice, she was just a very empowering person. Whether she was talking about love, whether she was talking about discrimination or prejudice, it was basically always taking a stance and putting your foot down and speaking your mind. I mean, that's what whole song of respect is about. And it's just like, you're going to have to respect me. Doesn't matter if you like me, but respect you will give me. And that manifests itself anywhere: work, personal relationships, family. Like, yeah. And that was kind of the underlying of all her messaging. And that's great. What I probably love the most about her. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love asking this question because everybody has a different art, right? And it stirs different feelings in them. And again, like I have a friend who's like, I don't feel emotions. I'm like, okay, let's work on some art. Like, let's find some art to like
figure some way for you to be able to express that, because there's something, I'm pretty sure something probably happened that caused her to turn it off. Yeah. You have to figure it out so she can unplug it. Yeah.
And even though this is a podcast about like work and workplace and stuff, like there are emotions in the workplace and you can't just turn them off. But I really think you have to acknowledge the emotions that you're feeling, right? And feel them,
especially
through
in leadership. Them. Yeah. Because you're dealing with a team that have varying emotions from day to day, and different things incentivize them. And so for me, even when I'm managing, whether it's vendors or things of that nature, although there is a bottom line that I need to get done, I still have to sit back and go, okay, this person has a whole life outside of their business. And I don't necessarily know what happened today, right? And I'm going to get upset because this deadline wasn't met. Let me kind of talk to them and figure out where their headspace is, because maybe I can help solve the problem so that I can get the result that I need. And some people may think that, well, if you're paying them for a service, that's too much. But I think you build long-lasting relationships and you're going to get the best work from this individual if you take those extra steps. And you're going to get those price breaks down the line because they're going to remember that. Yeah.
Again, the point of the podcast, we do business with other humans, right? And if you are investing the time and not treating it like a transactional relationship, but you're actually investing the time to build a relationship, to understand, where are priorities, where are deadlines, like what's going on? Do you have an elderly parent at home?
Yeah.
Who in your family has corona? Like help, right? Understand.
Help me help you. I tell them, help me help you.
Bea, thank you so much for your time with us. You have shared so many goldmine nuggets of helpful, useful things for our audience and our listeners. Everybody go check out Bea's podcast, Nightcap with Brené Brown. It's amazing. It's hilarious. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. It's been a joy to talk with you. And it's the new relationship that we've built. So I look forward to staying in communication with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on the PeopleNova Podcast. My name is Rachel O'Neill. The team here at PeopleNova Human Capital would love to hear from you. We are always curious to hear from our listeners. So go ahead and send us an email, podcast@peoplenovahc.com, with your workplace questions or suggestions for who you'd like to see on our show. If you send us an audio memo, we may include your question on the show. Lastly, we are here to amplify. Our guests are amazing entrepreneurs, and we want you to forward our newsletter to someone in your network who needs to know the amazing things our guests are doing, so together we can make a